All right, everybody, welcome back to another deep dive with us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
This time we are taking a look at Atomic Habits,
Yes, by James Clear.
which, it's a book we've both heard about, obviously.
Sure have, yeah, very popular book.
And people are really interested to know, how can we kind of achieve these huge results with just small changes?
Right, I think that's kind of the promise of the book, and what is attractive about the book is it seems like almost a very manageable way to reach your goals.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of trying to do like a complete 180,
Huge overhaul.
yeah, huge overhaul, you just, you know, make tiny changes.
Tiny little 1% better every day.
Yeah, and so um, I think maybe one of the first things we should talk about is this idea of the compounding effect.
Yeah, and that is actually one of the core principles, I would say, of the book is that, making these small improvements consistently over time can lead to really remarkable results.
Yeah, it's like the idea of compound interest, but you're applying it to like your habits.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, if you think about it, just as small deposits into a savings account can grow exponentially over time,
Oh, yeah.
so too can these small changes in our habits lead to significant improvements in the long run.
So even if you don't see like immediate results,
Right.
just knowing that they're kind of building up.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really encouraging because a lot of times we give up on things because we don't see those results right away.
Yeah, we want that instant gratification.
Exactly. But if we can kind of shift our mindset to think about the long term,
The long game.
yeah, then it becomes a lot easier to stick with those small changes and let them accumulate.
So he outlines what he calls the 4 laws of behavior change,
Yes.
which is basically a framework to help us build better habits.
Yes, exactly. And so those four laws are make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying.
So, okay, let's break those down a little bit.
Okay.
So make it obvious. So that's basically about being aware of your habits, like actually like noticing when you're doing them.
It's also about environmental design. So, like setting up your environment in a way that makes the desired habit more obvious and easier to do.
So like if you're trying to drink more water,
Right.
you would like leave a water bottle on your desk.
Exactly. Yeah. Or if you're trying to work out more, you might lay out your workout clothes the night before.
Yeah, just so it's like right there in front of you.
Right.
Yeah, and then make it attractive. So that's all about, finding ways to actually enjoy the habit.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one because if we don't enjoy something, we're not going to stick with it.
Yeah, it's like, I've been trying to get into running lately,
Okay.
and it's like so much easier to do when I like find a really beautiful trail to run on.
Right, exactly. Or if you listen to music or a podcast that you really enjoy.
Yeah, that helps too. Or
Yeah.
even like finding a running buddy.
Absolutely. Yeah, having that social support can make it a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, so you're not just like slogging through it alone.
Right, exactly.
And then make it easy. So that's about like breaking down the habit into smaller steps.
Yeah. Yeah, making it as frictionless as possible.
So instead of saying like, oh, I'm going to read for an hour every day,
Right.
you could just say, okay, I'm just going to read one page.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's a really important one because it's a lot less intimidating to start with a small goal.
Yeah, it's like a much lower barrier to entry.
Right.
And then once you've read one page, you're like, oh, maybe I'll read another one.
Exactly. And then before you know it, you've read a whole chapter.
Yeah, exactly. And then make it satisfying. So that's about like rewarding yourself.
Yeah, reinforcing that habit loop.
So you're more likely to keep doing it.
Exactly. And so that reward can be anything that you find enjoyable.
Yeah. So like for me,
Yeah.
when I work out,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I always look forward to that like post-workout smoothie.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
So it's like, I'm actually like looking forward to that part.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're associating that positive feeling with the habit.
Right. So it's not just like, oh, I have to go work out.
Right.
It's like, oh, I get to have my smoothie after.
Right, exactly. And I think that's a really important distinction.
So, okay, so we've talked about building good habits.
Yes.
But what about breaking bad habits?
Right.
Because I feel like that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. And Clear actually addresses that as well. And he talks about how you can invert the four laws to help you break bad habits.
Okay, so like the opposite.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of make it obvious, it's make it invisible.
Okay.
And instead of make it attractive, it's make it unattractive.
So like if you're trying to stop snacking,
Right.
you would like hide all the snacks.
Exactly. Put them out of sight.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. Or if you're trying to reduce your social media use, you might delete the apps from your phone.
Yeah, I've definitely done that before.
Yeah. It's a really effective way to make it invisible.
Yeah, because it's like if you don't see it,
Right.
you're less likely to think about it.
Exactly. And then make it unattractive. So that's about focusing on the negative consequences of the habit.
So like with social media, you could think about, You know how it's like a huge time suck.
Right, or how it can make you feel anxious or inadequate.
Yeah, and then make it difficult.
Uh-huh.
So that's about introducing friction into the habit.
Yeah, so if you're trying to stop snacking, you might keep unhealthy snacks out of the house altogether.
So you'd have to like go to the store.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's just making it more difficult to actually engage in the habit.
Yeah, and then make it unsatisfying. So that's about like removing the reward.
Right.
So like you're trying to quit smoking. You
Yeah.
could, like every time you have a craving, you could like snap a rubber band on your wrist or something
Right.
like that.
That's a classic example. Yeah, and so you're associating that negative feeling with the habit.
Yeah, so it's not as enjoyable anymore.
Exactly. And so I think the key takeaway here is that just as we can use these laws to build good habits, we can also use them to break bad habits.
Just kind of like flipping the script.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah. And so it's really about understanding how these laws work and then applying them to our own lives.
Yeah. And one thing that I think is really important to remember is that we're all human
Yes.
and we're not going to be perfect.
Absolutely.
So we're going to have slip ups.
Right.
But Clear talks about this idea of never missing twice.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because it takes the pressure off of being perfect.
Yeah, it's like you don't have to beat
Yeah.
yourself up
Right.
if you like miss a day or something.
Exactly. And so the idea is that if you miss one day, you just get back on track the next day.
So it's not about like, oh, I messed up, so I might as well just give up.
Right, exactly. And I think that's a really common thought pattern.
Yeah, it's like all or nothing thinking.
Yeah, and so I think it's really important to kind of challenge that and say, you know what, I'm not perfect, but I'm going to get back on track.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've definitely learned in my own life
Yeah,
is that, it's not about being perfect. It's just about being consistent.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really encouraging because it means that we can all make progress even if we're not perfect.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important message because I think a lot of people feel like they have to be perfect in order to achieve their goals.
Right.
And that's just not true.
Not at all.
So yeah, I think that's a really empowering message.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then one last thing I wanted to touch on
Sure.
is this idea of shifting from motivation to identity.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, and I think it's a powerful one.
Yeah, because Clear talks about how, instead of focusing on what you want to do, you should focus on who you want to be.
Exactly. And so it's about shifting your mindset from I want to lose weight to I am a healthy person,
Oh.
or from I want to write a book to I am a writer.
So it's like you're embodying that identity.
Exactly. And so the idea is that when you start to see yourself as that person,
Yeah.
then your habits will start to reflect that.
So it's like you're not just like doing these things, you're
Right.
being that person.
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful shift because it makes it a lot easier to stick with your habits.
Because it's not just like some arbitrary goal.
Right.
It's like who you are.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's a really important takeaway from the book is that if you want to change your habits, you need to start by changing your identity.
So as we kind of wrap up here,
Sure.
what are some of the key takeaways that you want listeners to remember from Atomic Habits?
I think the biggest one is that small changes can lead to remarkable results
Yeah.
if you're consistent over time.
Yeah. It's not about like making these huge drastic changes.
Exactly. It's about those small 1% improvements every day.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to remember that it's not about being perfect.
Absolutely.
It's about progress.
Yeah. And it's about being kind to yourself.
Yeah. And I think another key takeaway is that, your habits are a reflection of your identity.
Yes.
So if you want to change your habits,
Yes.
you need to start by changing your identity.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think that's a really empowering message because it means that we all have the power to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah, I think so too.
So for everyone listening out there, it's one small habit that you can change today to start your own journey of atomic growth.
That's a great question.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything huge.
Right.
Just something small that you can do consistently.
Yeah. And just remember that those small changes can really add up over time